Welcome back to the Explainer. So if you've ever tried dropping a language model straight into a production coding environment, well, you already know the drill, right? They're incredibly powerful, absolutely, but man, they are wildly unpredictable. Today, we're diving into a massive paradigm shift. We're moving away from that chaotic, stochastic text generation and getting into rigid, deterministic software engineering. Basically, we're going to learn how to tame the AI Wild West.
Because here's the thing. Enterprise software demands absolute determinism. Think about it. A single hallucinated dependency or just one dropped bracket can literally crash an entire pipeline. But foundation models, they're probabilistic guessing machines by nature. So how on earth do we bridge that gap? How do you force a fundamentally unpredictable AI to write perfectly predictable production-ready code? Let's figure it out.
To build this rigid assembly line for AI, here is our roadmap. First, the AI determinism problem. 2, token and schema enforcement. 3, compiling and object-oriented agents. 4, stateful orchestration and repair. And finally, number 5, the enterprise strategic blueprint. Okay, let's jump straight into section 1, the AI determinism problem. Specifically, why standard React loops in CLI agents face a massive vulnerability if you don't have rigid guardrails in place. This right here perfectly illustrates the nightmare scenario, the unrecoverable infinite failure loop. This happens when an agent just can't converge on a valid state. Picture an agent trying to fix a failing test. It edits a file, runs the test, and boom, it fails because of a missing dependency. Okay, so it edits the file again, makes another bad assumption, and fails again. Without strict loop bounds or circuit breakers, this cycle just repeats endlessly. Next thing you know, you've completely exhausted your token quotas, or worse, completely blown through your team's API budget. Not good. But to stop that chaos, we've got an absolute arsenal of 7 specialized Python libraries. Think of these as strict, non-negotiable circuit breakers. We're going to break down the mechanics of how developers are using these specific tools right now. Kind of like distinct grid cells in a massive control panel to force those stochastic LLM outputs into rigid, production-ready compliance. Moving into section 2, token and schema enforcement. Let's look at how we actually filter that messy, unstructured AI text into nice, validated, predictable boxes. Starting right at the API level, we have instructor. You can visualize this as unstructured text flying in, and instructor acting as this aggressive filter, catching that text and forcing it into a beautifully structured, validated, pydantic model box. And if the model happens to hallucinate, no problem. Instructor automatically triggers auto-retry loops on failure until the model gets it exactly right. Now, going a layer deeper to the inference level, we've got outlines. This one is super cool. Outlines uses logic masking as an individual token-by-token character parser to mathematically block invalid syntax. Instead of waiting for the model to finish speaking and just keeping your fingers crossed that it's right, Outlines reaches directly into the model's brain during generation. It indexes target JSON schemas, or regex, into a state machine, physically preventing the model from ever emitting a token that breaks your rules. Because of that, Outlines scores a perfect 10 out of 10 for determinism in local model deployments. It completely eliminates syntax errors. Why? Because it's literally mathematically impossible for the model to produce invalid output. It's an unbelievably powerful way to guarantee compliance at the most foundational level. All right, section 3, compiling and object-oriented agents. Let's see how this all builds up into compiling prompts and integrating true object-oriented architecture. Next up in our toolkit, we have BAML and DSPy. BAML is fantastic. It locks down enterprise projects by compiling a schema-first, domain-specific language right into typed client objects across languages like Python and TypeScript. On the other hand, DSPy shifts you entirely away from manual prompt engineering. It treats your prompts like code declarations, compiling abstract prompt signatures against your own custom metric checkmarks to optimize and find the perfect production prompt. Then there's NVIDIA Object-Oriented Agents, or NOA. NOA is great because it wraps agent logic inside standard Python classes. It allows your standard methods to execute deterministically, while methods defined with just an ellipsis act as runtime reasoning loops. So it keeps your object state and static validation strictly bound within a familiar programming class and seamlessly defers to the LLM only when it hits a really complex reasoning task. On to section 4, stateful orchestration and repair. Because once we actually generate the code, we still have to orchestrate these complex multi-agent workflows and, crucially, heal them when they inevitably break. And that brings us to LangGraph. LangGraph completely abandons those old linear one-way chains. Instead, it models multi-agent workflows as stateful, cyclic graphs. If an agent fails, LangGraph knows exactly how to route it back for correction. And maybe the best part? It integrates manual human permission gates to prevent any destructive actions without your explicit say-so. Wrapping up our toolkit, we have Guardrails AI. If something somehow slips through all those previous layers, Guardrails is your ultimate safety net. It runs a post-generation validation pipeline to parse the output, detects structural anomalies or stuff like PII leakage, and then, here's the magic, it performs surgical, targeted, self-healing repairs on the malformed output. Section 5. The Enterprise Strategic Blueprint. So, stepping back, why does all of this actually matter for DevOps professionals and systems architects trying to deploy these agents today? Simple. To trust autonomous agents at scale, you absolutely must combine the deterministic libraries we just talked about with a very specific operational blueprint. You need to standardize your project contexts using mandatory declarative rules files. You've got to deploy post-execution hook scripts, linters and test suites, to verify that AI code before it ever merges. You should be securely connecting to external enterprise data using model context protocol servers. And like we touched on earlier, you simply have to enforce strict iteration caps to stop those endless React loops in their tracks. This whole transition fundamentally changes what it means to be an engineer in the third-generation terminal era. Listen to this. We are no longer just writing syntax. We are systems architects. We define the constraints, we set the memory bounds, we delegate tasks to these autonomous agents, and then we route their work through systematic verification pipelines. The actual value you provide is migrating away from the act of typing out syntax and moving entirely to the act of defining precise intent. So here's the big question for you to chew on. Are you ready to stop typing syntax and start architecting intent? It's a huge shift. Take these frameworks, integrate them into your own workflows, and go build your rigid factory. The Wild West era of stochastic guessing and enterprise code is officially over. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you in the next one.